Welcome everyone. My name is Sam McLaren. I'm a service improvement analyst in the digital team, and today I'm going to be talking about experimenting and testing ideas as part of the Changing the Digital Mindset series. So this series is based on elements of the digital design toolkit that we have in the team. It's not a physical one, it's more of a metaphorical one, all the skills and knowledge and templates and everything you would possibly need with design. As we go through the presentation, you may see different colors and different symbols on slides, and these represent the stickers that we use in the team to represent the different areas of digital. So we have We Can Change That, Humans Before Tech, Think Big, Act Small, Design Good Services, Understand Your Users, and Work in the Open. So the first one we're going to talk about is Think Big, Act Small. So is anyone familiar with the double diamond? So the double diamond is broken down into 4 areas. It's discover, define, develop, and deliver. I'm going to go into more detail about those in a second, but as a quick overview, discover is around user research and finding out what people are saying and thinking and feeling about what you're working on and what you're doing. Then you start to define that into key themes and problems and things that people are saying, the commonality. And then you'd have developing the solutions for those in the development stage and then delivering those solutions and those ideas. So this is a slightly more in-depth version of the double diamond. I wouldn't worry too much about the finer detail. The main point of this is when you start with the experimenting and the testing, you're in that middle stage where that blue arrow is. You're just heading into the development stage. You've done your discovery. Now you're heading into development to start with your alpha, which then works into your beta or beta, and then into your go live. The government digital service have a slightly different way of looking at this. This is a slight graphic that they've done, but this is still the same in terms of the user needs. You go from discovery to alpha to beta and then into go live with your prototypes. So once you go from discovery to development, you might have some different things. You might have a different hypothesis. You might be thinking at the start of the discovery, you might be thinking, I think we could fix it this way, or oh, I really think if we brought this in or we did this, and then by development, you might have completely different ideas. You might have seen all the things that people are saying in the user research. You might think, let's test that idea, or I'm not really sure if that will work anymore. And that's really important stages of this process. In the define stage, you will come up with these problem statements, and these problem statements are going to be talking about all the things and all the commonality and themes that are happening in your research. So if you were doing a process and everyone was saying that the process is too slow at a certain point, the problem statement might be, how might we improve the speed of this part of the process? And then out of that will come multiple ideas. It's really important to come out with multiple ideas out of your problem statement, because then the more ideas you come up with, the more likely you're going to engage different parts of your brain and the creativity, and you might come up with something that maybe you didn't think. If you just came up with one idea, you're not going to come up with something as good as if you come up with 5 ideas. And there might be a commonality between all 5 of those ideas that you think, actually, well, why don't we combine some of those? One aspect of testing and prototyping is around creating wireframes. You might not be aware of what a wireframe is, but I will go into that later on. A wireframe is something that demonstrates an oversee of the functionality of the design. It can be made of lines and boxes, so you get a visual aspect of the design, so it's easier to see. They're fast and easy to create, and you can quickly get them approved, quickly change them. And they're a simple structure, which makes you focus on the bigger picture. Prototypes, on the other hand, are slightly different. They're more advanced than a wireframe. It's visual and it can be interactive with. It has the visual characteristics. It's a high fidelity prototype, is to be as close to the final product as possible, but not all prototypes have to be like that. You can test with real users, and they're interactive and they're clickable. So here's a kind of side-by-side comparison between the two, that really they work in different ways for different functionality, and I'll go into some of those now. So this is a wireframe example. that was used. It's not clickable, it's not interactive, but it does give you a visual aspect and design of what you're looking at. That you might recognize was actually turned into the Dorset Council website. So if you look at the quick links and the tabs and the news articles and then go back to that design, you can clearly see what some of the aspects were taken from that wireframe when they were developing the solution. So now I'm going into about prototypes. I'm going into the prototype section. So what is a prototype is probably a question that you're all thinking right now. So an example of that is a cardboard prototype. We've used these before and they look a little funky, but what you can do is you can create a sort of flow chart or a design of the process, and people can use them to connect more with what they're looking at and what they're going to be clicking on. And you can do this in lots of different ways. You can use Lego, you can use, there's so many different ways to prototype to get different people engaged depending on your audience and your users and what you need to get out of it. But the main point is you're going to be connecting and people are going to be looking at what you're doing and testing it, which is the important thing. So you can do cardboard prototypes. In the past, the organizations use virtual realities, and we've seen on digital roadshows that the team have been to, and the tech's always improving, but things like planning, and you can give the experience to a real user without actually having to physically go anywhere. Role playing is a really key part that you can do. I put that graphic in there because I'm sure everyone feels the same sometimes about when they're in a meeting and it's like someone suggests let's do a role play. But it's really important because you can put yourself in the shoes of the user and understand more of their perspective and their empathy and what they're going to be thinking and feeling and what they might like during the process. You can do a storyboard and tell your story because then you'll get the visualization aspect. There, I got that right. The engagement aspect, the empathy of the user, and the memorability is it'll be more memorable than just some text or a couple of little graphics. So here's an example of this with the stepping forward together piece of work. So you can see that they've used these little graphics here to visually tell a story of what the user goes through, whether that's from ringing to someone to getting their report and problem fixed. Another example of this was the education healthcare plan screen, and it's a tracking tool. This was a prototype that was developed and they wanted to have some time testing the different aspects with the user before they could get the full version out, and it increased the confidence of what you're delivering and how the valuable it's going to be and what it's going to provide. This was a school transport prototype. This is being worked on at the moment, and this is quite simple. It's just a form, but because it's done as a prototype, it can be iterated on and improved and changed over time and tested with the people who are going to be using it, which is a really important part because you could have a room full of council staff talking about how great this form is, but if you take it out to the users and they don't understand it or they don't like it, then what's the point? This you may recognize, but it's slightly different to how you might see it at the moment. This is Performance Manager outline, but it's now called My Roadmap. And this is what it used to look like when they were testing the various different aspects of it to see what flows and where you can go on different stages, and then the prompt questions and test that really with users was the important part, testing it and testing it and testing it to make sure it was right before it gets rolled out and go live. So I've shown you some examples of prototypes, but why do we prototype is probably a question that you might have. So I'm going to tell you a little story that will hopefully provide some light on that. So you may have heard of this challenge. It's called the Marshmallow Challenge, and it's done in design workshops and team building all around the world. You have 18 minutes to build the tallest freestanding structure out of 20 sticks of spaghetti, 3 feet of tape, 3 feet of string, and 1 marshmallow. And the marshmallow must be on the top. I know there's some variations on this, but the marshmallow must be on the top. So here's some example of people doing this challenge. So you've got your team, you've got your 4 people, you sat around the table, 80 minutes, just about to start. What do you think the first thing that most people do? What would you do in this situation? The first thing people do is they orientate themselves to the task. They think, okay, so we got this amount of tape, we've got this amount of string, we've got this amount of spaghetti, we've got the marshmallow, and we've got these. So who's around the table? What are our strengths and weaknesses? What we're supposed to do? How long have we got? Every detail to orientate themselves to the task. Then they're going to plan what they're going to do. They're going to draw out drawings. They're going to speak with their team. They're going to talk about what structures exist, like Big Ben, and what bridges have good structural integrity, and should we use triangles? And let's draw that out. Let's just draw out a design before we do anything, and let's practice with some of the spaghetti maybe. And then they build. They've got their plan. They've got every detail in. They build and they build. They build their structure exactly to their plan. They talk about it. They go through it, and they go, okay, well, this is what we worked out when we designed it. Let's go through and talk as we go and build it. And then it can go one of 2 ways. It can be a ta-da moment where everything works perfectly, marshmallow on top, and it works great. Or they got their design, they delicately place the marshmallow on the top just as the 18 minutes is about to come to an end, and they have an uh-oh, and it all comes crashing down and it breaks. What causes the uh-ohs is the question I'm going to ask you in a second. Who has the most uh-ohs? It's actually people in businesses. Business students are a good example of this. Business students are one of the worst for the uh-oh moments, but any sort of business environment or office environment tends to make people go for the uh-ohs. So who does the most ta-das? Which students do the most ta-das? Students often build the tallest towers and they have the most ta-das. But how come? Well, one of the first things, this isn't the major thing that they do, but they don't try to become CEO of Marshmallows. They don't say, okay, I'm going to nominate myself as leader for this task, and I'm going to plan out and I'm going to design this, and then we're going to go with my ideas. That's one aspect of what they do. But another aspect is if you look at the way the business students, as an example, they orientate themselves, they plan, they build, and at the last second, marshmallow on top, and it all comes crashing down. What children do is they'll make a design, marshmallow doesn't work. Make a design, marshmallow doesn't work. Change the design, marshmallow doesn't work, and keep on changing, putting the marshmallow on, changing, putting the marshmallow on until they get a design that is really tall and works with the marshmallow on top. Instead of waiting all the way until the last second and then putting the marshmallow on top. So what they do is they iterate, they prototype, they review, they refine every single time, changing their design so they can get the marshmallow at the tallest it could possibly be without having those uh-oh moments. So why am I telling you this? Well, other than the obvious talk about prototyping, it kind of brings out some key points. Now, I don't want you to forget. If there's one thing you can take away, some of these points. So don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. It's okay if something doesn't work because you've learned not to do it. You need to be brave, be innovative, and you'll see the rewards. And the most of all, if there's one thing you take away from this presentation, is to remember the marshmallows. Next time you've got an idea and you need to remember the marshmallows about prototyping and testing and the benefits that can provide. Thank you.